Hello, this is the RPG Crawler, and welcome to a computer role-playing game review. Yes, I know, it's been quite a while since I reviewed a computer role-playing game. However, I have been sent one to review, and it actually caught my eye. If you would like to see more of these computer role-playing game reviews, let me know, and I can maybe restart Indie Game Friday or some variation thereof, or just do them from time to time. I do have another one I'm going to take a look at pretty soon. Not a role-playing game, but a simulator that will be of interest to an RPG audience, so there is that. For now, let's take a look at Into the Inferno. Into the Inferno is a first-person dungeon crawler made by a very small team. In fact, I think it's simply one developer. It uses assets from a purchased library, and it is done in the Unity engine, although it looks like the developer did the music personally. So with that in mind, I will mostly focus on the gameplay and the story. I will warn you now, it is a very basic sort of game, but for those of you who are pretty old school like me, this may not be a bad thing. It is also the first in a series of games, with its sequel, Crossing the Sands, set to release sometime in April of 2024. In terms of plot, Into the Inferno starts with you in a small village. A nearby mine has suffered a serious accident during which several miners were presumed dead, and monsters have flooded forth and had taken the children from the village back off towards the mines. It's up to you to go ahead and defeat the monsters, rescue the children, and maybe return the dead miners to their families. It's a simple enough plot, but it gets the job done. And it gets you right into the action. Character creation is a relatively simple and vaguely reminiscent of wizardry. You can make up to 4 characters in a party. There are 4 basic classes as well as 4 hybrid classes. The basic classes are the warrior, a standard fighter class, the wizard, a mage that specializes in offensive magics, the healer, it's basically your cleric that deals with healing magic and destroying the undead and demons, Thief specializes in hiding and ambushing and has the ability to identify items. Then the hybrid classes are the Trickster that combines Thief and Wizard, the Shaman that combines Healer and Wizard, the Mercenary that combines Thief and Warrior, and the Paladin that mixes Warrior and Healer. I will note that the Shaman class actually has its own spells list that not only combines certain aspects of the other 2 lists, but also has its own particular sets of spells within it. Ability scores are randomly generated, and there is Strength, Intelligence, Wisdom, Constitution, Dexterity, Agility, Charisma, and Luck. There are also a few different races, but these are mostly given to modify your starting ability scores with very little impact after that. They are the Dwarf, Elf, Gnome, Half-Elf, Half-Orc, and Human races. The only other option is to determine whether you're playing in normal or hardcore mode. The hardcore mode disables the quick save function and only lets you save at the 2 save spots within the game, the main inn, and a small encampment near the end. I have to admit that having played the game on normal for this review, while I would have liked to have attempted it on hardcore, I'm very glad that I did not. It would have made it a much more challenging effort. They certainly aren't kidding when they say hardcore, and it doesn't seem like it, but that simple change, that would really have put an issue into my way. I appreciate the randomization of the ability scores during character creation, and while being able to switch points between scores or otherwise switch scores within an array of abilities would have made it a little bit more user-friendly and would have speeded character creation up a little bit, I can appreciate the old-school method that went into limiting that. All of this material is also described in the manual, which, although it is simple in layout, details pretty much everything you need to know, including descriptions of all the individual spells. It is very old-school in that manner, and reminds me of playing a game from the early 90s or late 80s. In terms of saves, there are 3 save slots that you can save in at an inn, and the quick save slot, which will use the first slot you've used in order to save the game in the field. As far as gameplay itself goes, you are immediately presented with a first-person grid-based view of the world similar to an old-school dungeon crawling title. Character stats are listed in the bottom, and you can pop up a character sheet at any time that gives you their ability scores, equipment, as well as resistances. There are also some extraneous user interface elements that make me think this could easily be used on a tablet or other mobile device, and it wouldn't surprise me if there was a version on there. These can be hidden with a few hotkeys, and the most relevant actions within the game do have their keyboard hotkeys, so you actually can, once you get used to it, go pretty quickly through the game. There is a mini-map available in the corner, and one of the main things that troubled me throughout the entire game was I thought there was a lack of being able to zoom the map out and see more of your overall surroundings. Very late in the game, I discovered that you can in fact click on that mini-map and get a slightly larger view of the area, but there is no way to present the entire map of a level all at once, and unless it is a very small level. I guess some enlargement is better than nothing at all. In the shops, you get the ability to buy, sell, and identify items. This needs to be done to any item that you discover, and it can be somewhat limited in terms of the information it presents. You can do this either at a shop or if you have some sort of thief-based character, like a thief or one of the hybrids. There is a shop that can be used to uncurse items that you have accidentally equipped that are cursed, but otherwise you'll have to drop those items by hand before equipping them if you want to get rid of them, since shopkeepers will not purchase cursed items. There's also the ability to split and pool gold, with each character having its own gold value, as well as its own inventory. Once all characters' inventories are full of items, you cannot acquire any more. The main town is split between buildings and various storefronts, as well as the very occasional quest pop-up when you enter a household. It reminds me very much of the Bard's Tale from the town view. This is even to the point where you can run into enemies in town. They are generally weaker enemies, and the encounter rate, at least in town, is rare enough that I didn't actually run into any of the first couple trips I made into town, but they are in fact there. Exploration of the overworld almost reminded me of Might and Magic as well. There are sets of sections joined by transition areas with encounters laid out amongst terrain and little huts and tents. You also get random encounters as you walk around. You do recover some hit points and MP as you walk around, however, it is incredibly slow, so you only really do this as a sort of gradual emergency sort of thing. Otherwise, you have to return to town and recharge at the recharge shop. I will say that some of the area transitions are a little bit odd in that the textures are not... They don't stand out, so you'll see a blank wall, and it's only on one section that you can transition through to the next map. They could possibly be modified to stand out a little bit more and be more readily marked out. The actual combat is turn-based. They can go ahead and face multiple groups of enemies. I think up to 4 groups of up to 8 enemies each. You do have to select which group you're attacking, and this combat system does have ineffectual attacks, or rather it has cancelled attacks. So, if you have everybody attacking one creature and it dies before they all get their attack in, then for those who didn't attack, they just waste a turn. However, I will say that this does allow for heals no matter what. So if you're facing an enemy and you kill all the enemy and someone's down, but then the heal goes off that turn, it'll still heal them and then pop them up so that they can share an experience. And yes, characters who are unconscious at the end of a combat do not get to share experience. Characters who die or are unconscious can actually be raised as soon as their hit points are restored to positive territory again. You don't have to take them and do some sort of special raise dead spell. All you gotta do is heal them. Although the character screen does show them at 0 hit points, this is actually a negative number that's not reported. So it will take larger amounts of heals to get people to wake up after they've been reduced to very large negative values. Character options in combat can vary from class to class. Characters have an attack, block, dodge, use item, cast spell, or flee command. However, some items, or some characters such as thieves and thief-related characters, can also have a hide command, which unlocks a late attack in the next round, which deals extra damage if it hits. I should also note that there are very few usable magic items that are actually in the game. Most of them are potions. There are a number of items I thought could be used in combat that I couldn't figure out how to use if they can actually be used at all. And honestly, that covers most of the basics. You fight creatures to get gold, to buy new items or acquire new items as they drop, to upgrade your character's stats in order to get higher levels in order to face more powerful enemies. There are spell levels divided into a set of levels that you get every odd level, just like a D&D based game. However, the system does use magic point systems with higher spell levels taking more magic points, and in fact more powerful spells within the same level taking more magic points. That is, in essence, a very, very wizardry style old school game, all in all. So with the basics out of the way, some things that I did note during play I should mention. Difficulty curves up at the start of the game is rather steep, all up to the point at which you reach a level and then start steamrolling and everything. Once you've acquired a certain degree of gear and experience levels under your belt, some certain heals, then all of a sudden your survival rate goes through the roof, and it stays that way all the way till the end of the dungeon when all of a sudden the difficulty curve spikes up again. This is common for this kind of dungeon crawler and very much invokes the old school style, so I can indeed appreciate it. The encounter rate can be admittedly a little bit high, in fact so high it was annoyingly high in some instances. I should also mention the NPCs that you encounter outside of town, or rather the lack thereof. There are pretty much no NPCs you can encounter outside of town, except for I think a single shop, a magic recharge point, and like a save point. Most of the huts and tents outside of town, they gave me false hope at first because I've played Might and Magic, I've played other games, and I've seen those tents, and sometimes there are encounters, and then sometimes you open them and there's quests inside. In this game, they're just unique creatures to fight. It's just you go in there and it's a boss creature of some sort. So, yeah. I will say that the various encounters did tend to look deeper than they were in most instances. There are a few kinds of creatures that have special abilities that require a little bit of strategy, but the vast majority of creatures you can just divide into hard hitters, casters, and creatures with a debuff. And if you get through that, once you've got a strategy down for those, you can handle 99% of the encounters with pretty much the same strategy all the way through. I will also note that the final dungeon contains more levels in it than the rest of the game's maps combined. I got to the final dungeon and thought, wow, I can finish this recording relatively quickly, and then spent the next 3 to 4 days going through it. Every time I came to a new level, I thought, wow, I'm on the final level, and no, I wasn't. Until I was, but I was disappointed more often than not, to the point where I was on the final level. Everything pointed to it being the final level, and I was like, oh my god, there's probably another level after this. So, yeah. That having been said, I actually finished the game in a little bit under 17 hours, although I didn't find one of the last pieces for one of the main side quests. I will also mention that although I did enjoy it, this is mostly because I really enjoy old school dungeon crawlers. This game is desperately in need of some quality of life tweaks, like some more information on what an item might do. I wouldn't even mind if this was in the form of some Dark Souls style mention on it, with perhaps just a vague mention of like, this was owned by a great mage or whatever. Just, some sort of clue. I understand that most of these items just grant stat boosts, and you can just look at them on your character sheet and switch them in and out if you want. But some items had names that just screamed that it was useful for something other than just flat stat boosts, but I couldn't figure out what they were. I will also, if anything, it may not have been anything. It may have just been making me want to think that. I also will say that my other main complaint in this game, and this is a big one, the main issue I have with this game, returning to town from the depths of the dungeon got really old really quickly. Especially with the difficulty spiking up towards the end, you'll probably want to return to town to rest several times. There's no easy way to do it that I could see other than to crawl all the way out and then crawl all the way back in again. So I would have loved to see some sort of shortcut, such as the elevators in the original Wizardry, or some sort of teleporter from the bottom or something. Even if it's only one way, just cutting half of that transit time out. I would even go so far as to say some sort of recall and return spell would be useful. I know it would cut the game's length down even further, and it would make it a little bit easier towards the end, but honestly, all it would do, for the most part, is cut down like half an hour of wandering through mazes in order to fight enemies in order to come back up. And that's kind of my point. Some of the level design in the dungeon is just obnoxious as well, and it kind of exacerbates the whole lack of ability to pop back in and out. I was actually on board with the level design all the way through the overworld maps, all the way through the first couple levels of the final dungeon. But once you get the midpoint, all of a sudden at that point it shifts from merely being labyrinthine to being labyrinthine with an intention of making you go out of your way to delay you. This wouldn't be so bad except for the aforementioned lack of fast travel, as I mentioned, or at least some sort of rest point in the dungeon. The last bit of level grinding was a little drawn out for me as a result, since I would go down, get some experience, and then have to spend like an hour crawling back out of the dungeon, get myself healed up, and then crawling back down to where I was. I basically had to save scum a few bosses at that point just to get favorable rolls, just to avoid the trek back to town. If I was playing hardcore mode, I would have quit the game at that point, gotta admit. So, now that I've gone and pretty much trashed the game for a little while, gotta admit, I probably trashed a little bit more than it needed to, but what do I think about it? And I've done this before. I'll criticize the game, but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it actually enough to play through it to the very end. I finished the game, which is more than I can say for many, many titles, even ones that I've really enjoyed. Although in some ways it is tedious, and it harkens back to older generations of dungeon crawls, that was the point. It was supposed to. It's supposed to be that era of dungeon crawler. It very much captures a relatively simplistic era of dungeon crawl gaming and does so in a straightforward manner that is easy to get into after the initial setup. I would recommend this game and its sequel most likely. I haven't played the sequel, but it's coming out soon, to fans of the hardcore dungeon crawling genre, especially those who enjoy wizardry and wizardry-based games. It's a little bit simpler than those games. It's not going to do anything special, it's not going to advance the genre in any meaningful way, but it provides a solid experience, one that can be finished in perhaps a couple dozen hours, even if you go for complete completion, and provides solid entertainment value as long as you're willing to put up with some of the warts and the blemishes along the way. Although, let's face it, you may want to, even if you're interested, you're probably going to want to catch it on sale. For a solo or small developer, this is an excellent first foray into this type of game. Got to admit, it's better than... I've been looking at this since I was first made aware of it back when the sequel started getting kickstarted. In fact, I think I may have covered the Kickstarter for this as well. So I have been looking at this one for a while now. It was only just happenstance that the developer sent me a code for it, and I was like, okay, well, I'll take a look at it. Yeah, it's an excellent first foray into this game. It's actually better than I thought it would be just looking at the old Kickstarter, and I thought the old Kickstarter was, pretty solid. I look forward to seeing what the future brings in terms of further refinement and where the sequel goes. With that, I will wrap things up here. As always, I will provide a link to where you can get it below. If you like what you've seen, remember to leave a like, comment, guide feedback, and subscribe for more RPG content. And in fact, if you'd like me to cover more RPG games in terms of reviews on this channel, I used to do it all the time. I know I cut back. Let me know. Let me know. Until next time, take care and goodbye. And if you are still watching, I would like to take the opportunity to thank my supporters, the top tiers of which are listed on the screen, without whose support I would not have been able to offer the variety of content that I have on this channel throughout the years. If you're feeling particularly generous and would like to join them, you can support the channel. There are a variety of options to do so. I have a Patreon, a Subscribestar, as well as channel memberships enabled. If you are not in a position to contribute, simply leaving a like, a comment, or sharing my videos are all wonderful ways to help the channel grow without spending a dime, and are all greatly appreciated.